Hello, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural episode of How I Built It. This is the series where we at Cockroach Labs are going to be flipping script and bringing some CockroachDB users onto our stream, onto our YouTube, to talk a little bit about what they built with CockroachDB, how they built it, and have a chat, have a little bit of an interview. I'm Jordan Lewis. I'm an engineering manager here at Cockroach Labs. And with me today, I have Mentor.tech. Of course, a sort of our inaugural presentation here. We're going to try it out, but hopefully we're going to have a few more people that we're going to bring on week over week. Hackathon participants like Mentor.tech, as well as startups, other companies who are using CockroachDB. So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and bring on the folks who have built Mentor.tech, and we're going to have them introduce themselves. Hello, Alan.
Hi, Jordan.
Hello, Aman.
Hey, Jordan.
And hi, Harpreet.
Hey, Jordan.
So yes, welcome, guys. This is very exciting. I'm very glad to have you in our virtual studio here. I think what we'll do first is if you could go around and just introduce yourselves one by one, talk a little bit about what you're doing in life right now, and we're going to take it from there. So let's start with Alan.
Hi, so my name's Alan. I'm a fourth-year software engineering student at the Lausanne School of Engineering at York University with Harpreet and Aman. I'm a full-stack developer. I can do front-end, a lot of back-end with Go. Got my little Go Gopher always sitting on my desk.
Nice.
And I'm a big fan of CockroachDB, and I'm excited to speak about what we built this weekend last month.
Super cool. Okay, thank you, Alan. Aman.
Perfect. So a lot of parallels with Alan. Except I'm in third year at York University, Lausanne School of Engineering. And yeah, I'm a little more of an ambiguous developer, which means I'm still figuring out in terms of the direction I want to go. And that's where a lot of these hackathons have been coming in pretty handy. You get to explore a lot of different tech stacks, talk to a lot of great experienced people, and I'm really happy to be here.
That's super cool. I love the idea of an ambiguous, undecided. That's awesome. And Harpreet.
Yeah, my name's Harpreet. I'm a first-year computer science student at York University. I am a undecided developer as well. I just pretty much joined computer science in September, and I'm just trying to figuring out what I want to do.
Very, very cool. I bet you're happy that you met such a great group of other people to help you come into your first year with a fervor. So that's super cool. So one thing that's really cool about today's interview is that these folks have provided me with their pitch deck, which I thought was a pretty impressive thing. I thought when, last time I did a hackathon, I think I did not make any YouTube videos promoting my work. So kudos to you guys on doing that. But I thought that we could actually just go ahead and watch it to give everybody an idea of what Mentor.tech is. So let's go ahead and pull that up. And we'll give it a play.
Hi, everyone. My name's Alan, and I'm here to show off Mentor.tech, empowering anyone to find a mentor, no matter where you come from. My name's Alan, and this project was done by myself, Aman, Harpreet, and Amuik, all students at the Lausanne School of Engineering at York University. We came to this problem when we realized that the current mentorship model has many barriers for people, where you're either required to be a part of a strong network like a university, or you need to have the persistence to reach out and cold call potential mentors on platforms like LinkedIn. Throughout this process, it can be very difficult to sustain the mentor-mentee connection even once you find a potential mentor. Mentor.tech supports mentees and mentors through creating that mentorship connection and then nurturing and supporting the mentorship process through user engagement. Now, people from all lived experiences can find the right mentor for them with a program that sustains mentorship through active engagement.
Process. We already have an account. foo@foo.foo, very genuine. Our super secret password.
Great email address.
Let's log in. And here we have our profile information. We can update this profile to signal to others what our area of expertise is, our career technical skills, and generally our locations and whereabouts. So let's just say if we want to find a mentor, the algorithm that we have set up will have a certain selected mentors available from the matching system. And from here, you can come and select which mentor you feel like will be the best fit there on out, giving you some autonomy over the process. So Charlie seems to be great. Let's select Charlie. Great. It was a success. So now that we have paired up successfully with Charlie, let's just send her a small introduction. Hi, Charlie. Very nice to meet you. Are you available next week on Sunday? Let us submit. Perfect. It's been sent.
One of our hardest SQL queries, but we had a lot of SQL queries in this project, making this a very data-oriented solution. So how did this work? Well, we used Vue.js with the Nuxt.js framework to be able to create a framework for routing and state management deployed to Firebase hosting. Then Firebase auth manages the users, sending a request header with a bearer token to our Go backend on Google Cloud Run, which uses the Firebase SDK to authenticate the request. Then our Go backend will communicate with CockroachDB to handle all the data. For our next steps, we'll be looking at improving the matching algorithm to help users find things about themselves that they don't even know. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
That's so cool, you guys. I think, wow. Okay, wait, I actually have a question let's get rid of this. Yes, I kind of wanted to ask, like, is it typical that when you do a hackathon, you're going to make a YouTube video to go along with it?
Well, yeah. So I'm sorry, maybe I'll pass it off to Amin, because we've all done a bit different hackathons by now. But with all the shift to remote work, over the past year, hackathons had to adapt as well. And so, I remember, first going to hackathons and you're, sitting at a table with your project waiting for the judges to come by, no pitch deck prepared or anything. But with this shift online, a lot of times now hackathons just like submit, a 3-minute video, demo it, talk a bit about it. And so it's actually been really nice to see a lot of different projects, because now instead of just demoing to judges, you can see what your peers are doing in a well-organized format. And so it's also nice to have this video now. So when you're able to ask it, just say, check out the dev post.
That's so cool. Do you think that it kind of ups the level of like required effort to have to do a video? Like, does everybody kind of do one, or is it just like the pro stars like you guys?
I feel like all the winners do one now. At least all the ones I've seen won hackathons in the past couple of months. They all seem to have a good video presentation, good ideation, good problem statements, and it could be one of those like chicken and the egg situation where maybe having those ends up giving a great final product, or it could just be like maybe you're presenting it as well, and so you don't have to go to the trouble of setting it up. You get to see what the team worked on very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's very cool stuff. I'm glad that you guys took the time to do that. I think it makes a really cool thing. So I kind of wanted to ask, how did you guys get the idea to make Mentor.tech? Like, what was it about mentorship that decided, that sort of prompted you to come up with this idea and go ahead and, make something? It takes a lot of effort to make something. So why was this the thing that really got you guys excited?
Yeah, so I think one reason is that it kind of resonated with our team a bit, because I know working with our team with Harpreet, Amin, and Emily, they were less experienced in the development world. And I know, as much as I know that they're capable, there is a learning curve to building anything, especially when you're looking at building real products, with front ends, back ends, databases. And so, in the process of, myself mentoring them, it seemed like a very natural project to think about how can we help other people get mentorship, especially people who might not have these opportunities, people who enter the software field from non-traditional areas other than university. So that's how we got inspired, and we came to the idea. We went through a whole design thinking process for the implementation, and it was interesting to combine that into one weekend with actually building the product, to also focus on building a cool product that people might use.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. What about Aman and Harpreet? What does mentorship sort of mean to you?
It was an interesting one. I think for me, like, I've been on both sides, like as in like I've been some of the higher upper year students giving mentorship to the lower year students, whether it's part of clubs or just generally speaking. But I've definitely been on wanting to be on the receiving end of like, oh my God, there's like 17 different JavaScript frameworks to choose from. Which one do I choose and what do I use? And I think what was really nice about Mentor.tech and just generally the whole problem statement was that it felt like we were trying to take a very organic process and systemize it, which can be a very tricky thing to kind of, I feel like, do right, because a lot of what makes it at least fruitful on my end, and I feel like some of the mentors' end, is the organic nature of it. So we didn't want to lose that somehow, and I think that's kind of what made it really nice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for me, I've really been only on the receiving side of mentorship. Like, for example, Alan and Amin have been wonderful mentors to me. And I feel like a lot of people aren't really as lucky as I am. So then I feel like kind of building this platform allows us to kind of give everybody the chance to meet a mentor like Alan and Amin and just kind of like grow their career and find their path.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that quite a bit. So what would you say is like the kind of target audience for this idea? I guess maybe you're sort of thinking about building for yourself, which I think is a great way to come up with an idea. But if you had to pick sort of an archetype, what would be the best sort of ideal user for Mentor.tech?
I think it's really taking that position of like a dual-sided marketplace where you're trying to bring in both mentors and mentees, and that was a unique aspect we had to think about it. And definitely, I think it's oriented towards young professionals, anywhere between people who are really motivated in high school to, post-secondary students in university or college, or even people who are new grads or still young in their career. And then on the mentorship side, what we thought is it's really a useful tool for the people who are more established in their career, even a bit younger, to find early talent that they can mentor. And, even though they're giving a lot initially, our goal was to create a platform where, the people they mentor would be able to then provide value to their mentors themselves, or they themselves would be able to take on mentees as they become more experienced. And so, but definitely like a young professionals type of space, people who know how to use computers, and obviously in the tech area to the high growth markets.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. How do you guys think about like mentorship as it sort of, I guess, so you're all in school right now, and thinking about your, upcoming, professional transitions, whatever that may be. What kind of like things do you need most that school maybe doesn't provide? Maybe I'll ask Aman to pick on him.
Sure. I guess for me, the biggest one is sometimes intangibles. It's very important. For example, like when you're speaking to people, the type of jargon you use. I know this sounds so silly, but little stuff like that can really, I feel like, increase your proficiency or make you feel more comfortable in situations around other more competent people. Even how to approach recruiters, approach more senior level positions, what to apply for, what to look out for, what's sometimes can seem like, a very good position might be a trap. These little things that you can only find out through experience, right? Like, it would be amazing to get someone's experience on that and be able to not have to go into some of those pitfalls. I guess that's kind of on the receiving end for someone like me is looking for.
That makes a lot of sense. So could you give me an example? It sounds like there could be some kind of funny stories there. What are a good example of like some missing jargon or something like that?
Oh, some missing jargon. Oh man. I feel like I'm still in that boat of like, I don't know all the jargon. I'm sitting beside full stack developers and you're talking about 13 different microservices, all the new JavaScript web frameworks, the differences between Vue, React, and the React stands and the Vue stands coming in, fast prototyping, fast application, agile, Scrum, Sprint. And I'm just over there like, yeah, I know some of those terms.
Yeah. You really need that. Really need a good mentor to come in and tell you don't care about those buzzwords, microservices, bad approach to take, especially as a student. Don't think about it unless you're working at a big company. Monoliths all the way for us youngsters.
That makes a lot of sense. Actually, so maybe that would be a good transition to talk a little bit about the tech stack that you guys chose to use. Because I was just watching that video just now, and I watched it before the interview a little bit. To be honest, I mean, you guys used quite a few different numbers of technologies there. It's no joke of a tech stack, I would say. And I think, I don't know many of those things that you talked about, to be honest. So how did you guys go about finding that tech stack? Well, why don't you just give us a rundown of the tech stack again, and we can talk about individual parts of it next.
Yeah. So I'll just go over the rundown, then I'll hand it off to Amin or Harpreet, talk about what they did specifically. But it definitely started a lot because teaching, my team from the start, I want to go with something that I was comfortable with. So when I do any of front end development, I've tried my hand with React. I find it a bit complicated, but I find Vue really intuitive. And so it's easy to put together a front end, a lot of libraries that are ready to go and making nice looking websites. And JavaScript is, pretty universal within software development. But then for the back end, as I showed off with my little Gopher earlier, I'm a pretty obsessed Gopher, you could say, I guess. And I do really care about the community behind the language, and it's what I do all my programming. And so it was just natural for me to take some of my old projects and use that experience to work on a back end. And I was teaching our fourth team member that as well. And then for the databases, I've worked a lot with different databases, Redis, Elastic, Postgres, MySQL, but mainly because Cockroach, was at this hackathon. It was a great opportunity to use it, with their forever free clusters before they come out, and to have something that was built on the Postgres protocol, and I'll talk maybe more about later, made things super easy to just adapt to it. And I didn't do the front end personally myself, so maybe that's something Harpreet and Aman can speak to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's hear about that front end. We can.
Well, for our front end, we primarily handle it with Vue.js, and then we used server-side rendering with Nuxt. And well, for my case, I pretty much was the UI developer with Amin. We both made the front end, the login forms, and pretty much just kind of styled it, I guess.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Wait, actually, yeah, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, it was so much fun seeing how they went from knowing no JavaScript to being able to implement, an actual front end, that looked good. Obviously it's a hackathon and some things are hacked in, at the last moment if there's broken functionality. But to just see, people go from zero to something it's the first step to becoming a real software engineer and developer. And, I really thought it went with the theme of mentorship, right? Learning how to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was actually quite happy with the final results. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that can do a whole lot better, but considering I'm like, hey, this is responsive, it doesn't look half bad. You wouldn't turn this on and right away think this is hacked together. No, this looks good. I think I can reuse some of these the template of the website, even do my own personal sites or future hackathons. So I think that was actually a really great experience. Learning Vue was interesting because obviously languages don't matter that much, except when you're first learning them. Then they matter a lot. I had a little bit of experience with React before. So coming onto Vue, there wasn't a whole lot of transition, even though some people might say there is a lot of transition, just because my little experience there wasn't that much. But it was very intuitive, I would say. Vue was very good for, I guess part of the jargon, fast prototyping. It had a lot of pre-built components, which is very good for stuff that we were doing, and ended up looking pretty nice and accurate.
That's super cool. And so tell me about Nuxt.js. What is that about, and why do you need to use it for any project, or this one in particular?
I think the benefits, just from people who maybe come from the React world, they have Next.js. It's very nice to have a bundled together framework that combines, the front end framework itself, Vue, with some state management, which is Vuex. So you can, share state between all your different pages, for example, and you don't have to pass everything through components or parents. And then the final part of it is server-side rendering, which, although not a big part of this project, is really nice and more of a real project, because you have benefits with websites like Google that are coming by to try and pick out words, and it's able to do the rendering on the server side instead of the client, so you'll get better SEO results. But overall, the Nuxt framework provides a lot of functionality. I touched on that we used Firebase for handling our users and authentication, and Nuxt has its own little Firebase package that integrates with Vuex and everything right out of the box. And so, coming from when I started probably doing my first HTML, CSS, JavaScript in elementary school, where you're using fetch and making, calls, and, you're changing the DOM and all of these things. It's very nice to experience Vue and state management, all these things that, come all these years later, even though the technology was already there to have them previously. Now it's just gone to another level. which with Nuxt and Next have really taken it. And it's definitely, I think, going to be the future for, a lot of people developing, is to use something more than just pure JavaScript, which can be really painful.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, this stuff, it's quite interesting how much you have to know in order to get into, I mean, yeah, like you guys do this together in how long exactly? It was like a weekend, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Yeah. We started really coding on the Saturday during the day, maybe during the morning. I think that's common for a lot of teams. And then we had to submit by Sunday in the morning. So we really basically worked on it for 24 hours. We spent Friday and Sunday or Saturday morning really thinking about the project we wanted to make. I don't regret the time we spent thinking about the project, because, we got to choose something that was impactful compared to, some people who make a what's in the fridge app, which, is, maybe you can get an earlier start on it, but it's a bit more of a simple idea, which, nothing wrong with that, building a project, that what you're doing, but there's also something to be said for building a project that is, that resonates.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. So let's see. I guess if you had to say, let's see. I guess Harpreet, you mentioned that you were. Was this the first time that you had learned some of these front end technologies? I think you had said that, right?
Yeah.
And so, how did you feel like coming on board with all of them? Like in your head, do you kind of see? Do you kind of understand like let's say you had to you like went off into the world and like were doing something fresh on your own or something like this. Would these the same tools that you would reach for? Would you kind of do the whole Vue, Nuxt, Firebase, Go, CockroachDB, Megastack kind of thing? I don't know if there'd be like a good acronym for that. It sort of sounds like something that you could build an acronym. But was that what you would choose?
I guess so, yeah, because a lot of the technologies, as Alan said, they're very intuitive to learn. They're very easy. Like the actual learning curve isn't as steep as something like React, for example. So then I can pick it up and I can kind of like build on it over time, and I can get pretty competent with it. So yeah, I would probably use those technologies.
That's cool. And Aman, are these things also were new to you when you worked on the project, or?
Oh yeah, very new. I think I did one hackathon before, and that was my first actual experience into what a full stack application looked like. And that's when I realized, oh wow, this is a lot more complicated than I thought. First year HTML, CSS doesn't really cover these things, like having a proper backend. So Vue was a very interesting one to learn. I think I definitely will use Vue again in the future. Just the way it's trending, how easy it is to build. I do think it's one of those things where you have to convince people, and I think Alan can attest to this. I was one of the people who needed convincing earlier on for our project. But I think once you get everyone on board, it can be a great way to learn, a great way to prototype, and to use again. In terms of Firebase, like user authentication is amazing. Like it just handles so much of it for you. I'm sure some people can do this very easily themselves, but for when you're starting off, to have that kind of built-in ability is really nice. I didn't get a chance to work too much on the back end, so I'm not too familiar, like in terms of like how to navigate that. But CockroachDB, just some of the stuff that it does, like for you, just coming out of the box, just seems really nice. I think I was telling my team members earlier, like self-healing clusters sound kind of like magic to me. Like that sounds really, really cool. So I think I would probably use all these technologies again. Maybe not all together, just because I might want to use stuff that I'm more familiar with. So maybe add on one technology at a time instead of adding on like 3 or 4 that I'm not familiar with at a time.
That makes a lot of sense. That's very cool stuff. I think, very, very amazing. I think it's a lot of different technologies pulled all into one app there. So I kind of want to ask a little bit about CockroachDB, since you mentioned that. What made you choose CockroachDB, and I guess Cockroach Cloud in this case, for your app? I guess there were folks at the hackathon, which is an easy draw as well. But I don't know, maybe that's the only reason. That would be a fine reason too. But any color.
Yeah, definitely having Cockroach there was one of the biggest reasons. I saw that they were there, so I know myself and even Harpreet, we did the Cockroach University courses that were available. And from coming from a person I've done lots of, database work before. I've even taken courses, in, the theoretical databases, learning relational algebra in university. It felt very intuitive. But more than just that, the support of the people from Cockroach who were there, Bilal, Richard, Amruta, they were, super positive. It was great talking to them. If we had any problems, they were there to listen. And So it wasn't only just an easy database, plug and play, start your cluster, and just switch out your database URL and whatever you're using, your driver. But more than that, it felt like there was a lot of support behind it. You have any problems, it's not like using a very niche database with limited documentation. You can essentially look through any Postgres documentation and get the same answer because of the way Cockroach has been implemented. And so it just made everything super smooth, other than the one time we broke our cluster with a recursive thing, which I'll talk about later, I'm sure.
Nice. Okay, very cool. So did you guys all take Cockroach University?
Yeah, I did. I took the course.
Nice.
I started it, but I didn't get a chance to finish it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fair. I imagine it's kind of like a lot of hours, probably. Maybe too many to do in a single hackathon.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was. I think while trying to kind of learn the ins and outs of Vue at the same time, also like dividing my attention to the back end, I felt like, okay, I need to focus a little bit here.
That makes sense.
Yeah, luckily they sent it to us the week before the hackathon, and they even said you get a T-shirt for doing it. Oh, I see Bilal in chat. Hey, but Cockroach University was super straightforward, especially if you're coming from other databases. If you use any sort of SQL, it's super familiar. Nothing about it will, be difficult. There's can be huge learning curves with so many databases, and migrating, to all these niche ones that aren't, just SQL based or, relational. But keeping things standard, meant moving to Cockroach for a hackathon was super easy. We didn't have to rethink our data. We still kept the same, view about, any relational database. It was just straightforward, easy, big fan. And now, I'd probably choose it over Amazon RDS in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. How familiar were you guys with SQL in general before this hackathon and before trying out Cockroach?
For me, I had never used SQL before, so then I guess this was my first time kind of learning SQL and even learning about a SQL database and just learning a little about like what a database actually is and what it does.
For me personally, it was also a very low experience. I've just done SQLite before, which you can imagine the kind of queries you can do on there. So that was about it on my end.
I gotcha. And I guess we heard some of Alan's experience. That's very cool though. Wow. So man, you guys really learned like everything top to bottom in this one like mega learning weekend. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So what would you say that was we'll start with the easy ones. What was the easiest part or like most fun or like most intuitive part of using CockroachDB and Cockroach Cloud?
I think the best thing for me was, kind of taking on the role of like a DevOps sort of person. Is I set up the cluster and it was super easy because it was so standard to just send my team the link to our cluster, the login details, the certificate, and say, put this command in your terminal and it'll put you into the cluster. And I think that was really nice that, it had a traditional kind of like REPL in the terminal. And being able to just treat it like anything else was really the easiest part of anything, because it makes that friction really low, and it's very easy to be onboarded onto the product. Honestly, I've had more problems setting up, more traditional databases before, especially before there's been so much hosted cloud databases, and Cockroach really solves a lot of those pain points, especially on a small project where you don't want to waste time configuring your database.
That makes sense. And what about SQL? I guess maybe for some of the folks who are newer to SQL, what was like, I don't know, what did you like about SQL, like the language? Maybe the answer is nothing. I don't know. It's an old one.
Yeah.
To be honest, on my end, what I liked about SQL is it seemed very intuitive, I guess. Yeah, like don't get me wrong, there was a lot of stuff I had to look up in terms of what to do, but whenever you saw a SQL, like a query, at least for me, I'm like, okay, I understand what it's trying to do. And then on top of that, I'll just combine with like general like operators, like star for selecting many. I was like, okay, I can see why this would be very easy to pick up and remember. Like it's like writing an English sentence versus like learning very hard syntax.
Yeah. I have similar sentiments as Amin. For me, I like kind of seeing SQL is kind of like reading English, because you can see, okay, I'm selecting some data from this database and this table, and just kind of writing a command. You basically kind of write it similarly as you would write English, I guess.
That's pretty cool. I think that's high marks for SQL there. So I'm kind of curious in your demographic and in the other folks at the hackathon, or maybe the other students that go to school with you, is SQL, how would you rate like SQL versus other non-SQL databases? Because SQL's, at this point, it's like quite an old language. And I'm curious, like, do people see it as something that's sort of old, something kind of complicated, something that like maybe is a little bit heavyweight? Or is it, would you say that people are thinking of it as a popular, good choice for their applications?
In my experience, what I see so many students gravitating to is, whatever they can build with quickly. And by that, I mean MongoDB, or just in general, NoSQL or not only SQL. For a lot of students, they don't take, I see Amruta asking, a lot of students don't take their database course until third year. And so you still have the first 2 years where, you're still attending hackathons, you're trying to build projects, but most people are having to learn database on their own. I think for a lot of people, the document stores like MongoDB or Cloud Firestore work really well. I think it takes a certain level of experience, just with data modeling to understand how a relational database fits together. And then there's that additional level of complexity once you have to learn the really important parts about things like indexes and, managing keys and joins and, subqueries. That's when things start to get complicated. But I think by my upper years, I see a lot of people using, SQL more than you were using document stores, because they realize how powerful it can be, how fast your queries can be. And once you know what you're writing, it's very straightforward. And you don't need to rely on ORMs as much if you're writing the hand SQL once you've taken all the courses. So that's been my experience with it. But I think there's definitely a lot that universities can do in the traditional sense to better teach what data and repository structures are for real projects, because for sure, this is the extent of it. I have seen very little talking about things like Redis or reverse indexing like Elastic.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And Aman and Harpreet, is that also your experience?
Honestly, I think Alan kind of nailed it. I think earlier on in the first couple of hackathons, like NoSQL databases like MongoDB are king, just because how easy it is to use. But one thing I've noticed as well is, like, as you're scaling up your application, those become kind of unmanageable, and you end up having a lot of, at least I did. I'm not. Maybe someone else does it, but you end up having a lot of. It's just not a very good way to manage user flow. So now I'm actually taking 3421. It's York University's version of databases, SQL databases, SQL algebra. And in there, like, we can just see like how much time is spent actually just creating the database schema. And from there, like, once you have the schema, actually creating the database and populating the data is the easy part. And that's kind of where I realized a lot of the earlier year students really struggle, including myself, because you're using stuff like, MongoDB. It's nothing problem with their database, the way they use it. It's just the way I think people implement it for very quickly accessing a lot of data and putting it in there. And it ends up not being able to scale as you're adding more and more information in.
That makes sense. And what do you think, Harpreet?
Yes, like as Amin said, a lot of people think NoSQL is very easy to use and so on. But for me, I've at my second hackathon, I ended up using Cockroach and kind of found it much more intuitive than something like Mongo, because I understand like what's going on, like what kind of queries I'm writing, like what data I'm pulling on and what data I'm pulling in. So just kind of seeing all the little pieces come together rather than having like it abstracted away.
Super cool. Okay, thanks for all of your answers here. So let's move to the dark side. What would you say was the most difficult or unpleasant parts of using CockroachDB and Cockroach Cloud?
I'm going to answer this because I also see Amruta put a question in the chat about how we learned the schema design. I think one of the most difficult parts of using Cockroach are not to do with Cockroach itself, but it's generally the SQL problems you'll run into. And maybe I'll start off with a bit of a fun thing. So we got our cluster on day one, and I was just doing my traditional flow, going into, JetBrains data grip, just, creating all my create table queries with it, just quickly because, I don't have time to spend to write them all by hand. And what I didn't realize is I was creating a query with a data grip that actually breaks in Cockroach. Because I referenced an index I had an index with the primary key and made a circular dependency, crashed the cluster. And so Bilal had to come in. He's like, hey, give me your show create table. And he's like, hey, I think this is the problem. And he helped me out. And I think, that's not specific just to Cockroach. I think those are just the, quirks of using, a general language between so many different, types of databases, that have their own protocols. But beyond that, things were very easy. I think, everything's very straightforward. I had an easier, maybe it's because I know, maybe because I've worked with Amazon RDS in the past, it was easier, but the onboarding experience overall, it was less friction than that. And so I have to give kudos to, being better than AWS, which is always my go-to for projects, as complicated as it is.
Nice. Okay. Very, very cool. Yeah, I think that sounds like an interesting one. The circular index dependency problem. We'll definitely, I think maybe Bilal has already taken this to heart and filed an issue or something like that. That sounds like kind of a fun one. And what about you, Harpreet?
Well, for me, I really didn't work with Cockroach that much, so I can't really say much. I never like I don't really have any issues with it. But but then when I used it at my second hackathon, the only thing was since I am a new beginner, it took me way too much time to set up my cloud cluster and set up all my queries. And yeah, I remember telling Alan it took me about 5 or 6 hours to set up the cluster, set up all the queries. Yeah, I know.
Harpreet told me, I was like, Harpreet, you should have called me on the phone. I would have just helped you.
Oh dang, that sounds like. Wow. Yeah, maybe I'll have to. Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Like, what were the sticking points there?
Well, for me, first of all, just kind of setting up remote login to the cluster. Mm-hmm. That was the issue, because each time I logged in, it wouldn't let me authenticate in, and then I realized I made some sort of dumb authentication issue with certificates. And then when I was writing SQL queries to put 70,000 lines of data into the Cockroach database, it wouldn't work. Cockroach kept crashing, and yeah, that was just a whole mess for me.
It sounds like something that we should probably dig into, but interesting. Yeah, I think certificates, right? Like that can be, that's not something that people have to use when they use MongoDB, right? Something that I've been thinking about, like how can we make it super, super easy for people to get started and not have to think too much about certificates?
Yeah, one thing I know that also Harpreet mentioned is just, maybe it's more of a niche thing, but just being able to import from a CSV or something, it makes that onboarding experience. It provides value to people, saying, you have all of this data stored somewhere, especially in a hackathon. You'll parse the data from a data set and want to throw it into your database. And then people are left thinking, well, what's the best way to put this data into CockroachDB? And a lot of people just end up, building a quick, Python script or something that goes through every row and imports it. It'd be nice if, there are tools out there like DataGrip, which will handle things for you, but making things more clear, especially to people who might be at the beginning of that learning curve, who don't know even what to Google to do something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I like that a lot. The CSV auto importer. It seems like kind of a cool feature.
Yeah, I imagine even if it could you import your CSV, it's here's a generated schema for you based on it, and it already broke everything up. I'd be like, wow, that'd be super cool if something could even infer a schema just based on a CSV.
Right. Yeah, very, very cool idea. And Aman, what about you?
Oh, it's a tough one, because like I said, I didn't work much on CockroachDB, and so I guess the only thing I would add, and it's not even really to do with the functionality of CockroachDB, I guess it's just more to do with time into space. Mm-hmm. Like as somebody who's learning anything, what you would really want to see is tutorials built with something. Mm-hmm. And just because there's so many tutorials out there with MongoDB, Postgres, and other kind of stuff, it's kind of easier to just kind of go there, pick up one of those, and then kind of manipulate it for your circumstance at the time. So I think it kind of would be nice to see more dedicated tutorials building not just a database, but a full application. So you can maybe take that and kind of mold it to your needs.
Yeah, maybe have the Vue.js, Nux.js, Firebase, Go, CockroachDB tutorial.
Yeah, if something like that would have been around, that would have been pretty cool.
I remember when I was a beginner, even the smallest thing sometimes in a tutorial that was different from building your app could throw you totally off track. And so sometimes it's nice just to have everything all in one together, building a Go app, with a Vue front end or something, because I see a lot of people gravitating to things like the MERN stack, right? Mongo, Express, React, Node, maybe because it just sounds, it rolls off the tongue well. But I think more than anything, it's just the abundance of resources is what puts people there, because they're saying, I want to do MERN. There's something for everything, every example I could ever need, I can find on this stack. And so I think, investing kind of into, how would you replace maybe Cockroach with Postgres, would help people who take those Pern stack or whatever tutorials and just say, well, it's Postgres, I can do the same thing with Cockroach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yes. I think there is something about good acronyms, right? Because right now we're looking at the
I have put so much thought into thinking how to combine Vue, Go, and Postgres together, and I'm just like, these letters do not work.
Yeah, you might have to introduce some sort of interstitial vowels in there, like sneak around with fake backronyms and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very cool, though. Okay, so let's see. I guess do you have any? Let's see. What was kind of like the best moment in that hackathon? Paint us a picture. You're inside of. I guess it's all remote too, isn't it? This time around.
Yes.
Yeah,
it is.
What was like the feeling of being in a remote hackathon for all of the folks watching who might not have been in a hackathon too recently? Harpreet, go for it.
Yeah, I was also about to pick on him too.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, like the best part of this hackathon was really like working together as a team and just really getting through the bugs. Like that, the actual process of development was actually really nice, but then it's kind of tough remotely when you're trying to build something and you have someone falling asleep at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and then like for example, Alan stayed up pretty much all night working on the database while I was pretty much fast asleep. Yeah, like it's like well, honestly, it's just similar to like a normal hackathon, except everybody's just on their computer, I guess. So then it's like I didn't see much of a difference, I guess, in terms of remote.
Yeah,
I'm kind of imagining like one problem that I could see is that in the hackathon in person space, right? It's like you're just filled with this energy. Everybody's like doing stuff. Like people are like eating pizza probably or something.
Yeah,
like,
it has that pizza smell for sure.
Pizza smell. But you're at home and you're just like, well, I'm just gonna go. Yeah, I'm just gonna take a quick nap. Like I'll get back to you in a second. And then next thing you know, it's like the morning and you like went to sleep. And yeah, I don't know. What about Aman?
If I'm being honest, online hackathons are difficult. They're hard, just in the sense of like, as like, so I'll say to mine as like, a beginner coming in, right? One of the best ways to learn when you're collaborative in a group setting is just by watching other people work. And that's probably true for every job everywhere, right? There's a lot of little things, intangibles you can pick up just by seeing someone's workflow, right? Like how do they tackle something? And they don't even know you're looking at them, but you are, because that's all you can really do at that moment, right? And online hackathons, for that reason, can be extremely difficult because you have to make a very curated effort to have a similar level of experience. Like my first hackathon I did, I was with a more experienced backend developer, and I was trying to do the backend with him. First time doing it at all, and it was a very difficult time just because like I was looking at videos and trying to code stuff on my own and trying to like make some simple routes, like very, very simple stuff, but it was taking me a long time. And I just wish that I could see what he was doing and see his workflow a little bit, just so I can pick up on that. And I think what was nice for what our team did is we did a lot of pair programming. And that's something that was really nice, is like we all were live streaming our screen at all times. Like, even if we were doing nothing, right? Like we're live streaming our screen at all time. Even if I'm not doing anything, I'm not coding, I'm just like tuning into Alan's stream or Harp's stream and seeing what's going on. And that was kind of simulating a little bit of the workflow experience. Some of those intangibles were being passed over. So I wish like there was some way to tackle that better, but that's really what it is for online hackathons. I find is you have to make such a concentrated effort to make that happen.
It's definitely a bit heartbreaking to be away from, how we're used to things. But I can say one of the ways we definitely overcame is using tools like VS Code Live Share, as Aman was mentioning, because more than just live streaming, you get terminal access, you get to, see what's running on their computer with like kind of little like SSH tunnel it seems to set up for you. And it definitely improved the workflow a lot, but definitely there are drawbacks from it. You know, it is nice to sleep in your own bed. It is nice to, you know, have your home, but, you know, it's nice to have that spirit of a hackathon where everyone else is hacking around you, pushing themselves, speaking with other hackers in person, sponsors in person who can give you insight, you know, mentors who can just help you one-on-one live, you can just find. And I see how hard every organizer, including myself in my own competitions I've run, you know, work in this online environment to try and replicate what we're used to. But more than anything, it just makes me excited to go back to our normal and to go back to the hackathons that I think, you know, have done so much. And I think that it's also been a time for innovation in hackathons. And I've seen so many new things been tried out, like a pre-hackathon workshop seems something so ubiquitous now that never used to happen before. And so even though that there are some problems being online, I think going back in person, there's going to be a lot of benefits that we've learned in this period that will improve the experience in the long term.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's such a good perspective. I really like your framing of how it's so important to have that pair programming aspect when you're at a hackathon, right? Because it points to something fundamental about programming, which I think I wish I knew this when I was in high school, which was like programming is a fundamentally social thing, right? It's like that there's sort of this like image of like a lone hacker or something like that. And I think the lone hacker archetype is something that's just so damaging to our industry, because ultimately it's like you have to learn from other people. And that's part of the reason why I like your Mentor.tech idea so much, is that it's like kind of cutting to the core of something that is true about engineering and programming, which is that like you got to learn from each other. You got to learn each other's all these like random things that you pick up, right? You said the workflow, the this, the that, like little things that you do, all those things together, it's gonna make you better as a programmer, right? You got to learn those from other people. So I really like that. So was that the main technology that you asked? I guess you probably know I'm a fan of also the live coding, live streaming kind of stuff. So were you guys mostly using the VS Code live technology?
We did both, actually. We were on Discord in a one big giant call, just sharing our screens, and also I think for quite large portions of it on just VS Code as well, doing live share.
Yeah, live share has a bunch of useful things, more than just, you know, coding in the same workspace. You know, I could just say, you know, come follow me, let me show you what I'm doing, and they can, you know, they'll follow my cursor around, or I can jump to see them. And even things, you know, help teaching version control and Git. You know, there are, you know, it's very simple. You know, you don't have to know 3 commands: git add dot or -a, git commit -m your message, git push. But beyond that, you know, when you start having to describe, you know, just even things like git checkout -b and then a new branch name, right? It's easy to just look in a terminal and just see what someone's writing versus, you know, trying to communicate it verbally. And so, it definitely comes with a lot of benefits just for teaching people. I think, you know, pair programming is something that should be done much more in schools, because I like to use the analogy, no one builds a house or no one builds a bridge on their own, right? As an engineer, you have to do it with other people. And of course, you'll see people, you know, posting on YouTube, I built a log cabin on my own over 3 years. But for the most cases, most people's houses are built by a team. And it's very important to just be cognizant of that when you're working on a team like a hackathon.
Yeah, I like that quite a bit. So I kind of have a question about the future of work from your perspective, right? It's like, as you guys, I don't know, you're the next generation. You're going to be entering the workforce in like, you know, 1 to 3 years, basically. And I'm curious, are you going to feel like you want to take these good things about remote work with you into the workforce, like talking on Discord with people a lot, or doing VS Code live share and stuff like that? I think, yeah, I'm just kind of curious, is that something that you'd want to preserve when you enter the corporate world?
Personally, yes, definitely. I think like one thing, you know, there's obviously a lot of negatives for COVID, but one of the positive things is it's taught people to communicate much better through like online mediums, right? Like I think people have learned very quickly that it's better to over communicate than under communicate. And I feel like that's been a very large problem in general in CS for most people, right? Like, and this is something that usually is not that noticeable when you're in person. You can quickly have those conversations back and forth, but all of a sudden, when you want to ask a question and you have to make like a 5-minute phone call, disrupt their workflow, all of a sudden it becomes a lot more mindful. And I feel like those kind of practices, taking it in, hopefully past COVID times, is going to be super helpful.
And what about you, Harpreet? Oh, I think you might be muted.
Whoops, my bad. Well, For me, I feel like the stuff that I learn remotely, like for example, Amin said, learning better to learning to communicate through online mediums and such. I feel like remote working had really taught me one thing, to kind of become a better communicator. And I feel like I can take that into the workplace, just kind of be able to like express what I'm thinking clearly, and kind of building, I guess, more of a collaborative environment, because as you said, most people listen programmers to be the lone hacker type person, but in reality it's more of a team effort rather than a single person.
Mhm.
And then I'd love to be able to bring like a new infusion of technology with just like, instead of sitting side by side, you could be halfway across the globe being my mentor and just kind of programming alongside with me.
Totally. That's so cool. Okay, guys. Well, I think we're butting up against time. So I think I want to ask you just like one last kind of question, which is, if you had to give some advice to the next person coming to this hackathon or any other hackathon, what would your best advice be for those people?
So I can start off a bit with some advice for people. I think that it's important in a hackathon. You don't need to know exactly what you're making before you get there. You can figure that out at the hackathon. But what you should figure out is what you kind of want to work with technology-wise, and to maybe be, unless you're very experienced and can really wear multiple hats, try and watch a few videos before the hackathon. It can make so much of a difference if you just prepare a bit, if you do examples. I know with Harpreet and Amin, we ran through some Vue, Nuxt examples, so they were familiar with syntax, because no one wants to get bogged down on the small syntax when they're doing something new. You want to be, dealing with the difficult challenges. And then more towards something I would say is really good for rapid development and for SQL rapid development is just be comfortable using things like SQL Fiddle, like JS Fiddle for SQL. It really lets you quickly test out building, tables, making sure they build correctly, inserting your statements, and then take everything you put in that SQL Fiddle during your hackathon, and make sure you put it in a file so you never lose it. Because I've written so many queries in my life that I lost, and I was like, like now I have to rewrite them and make sure it's the right one. And then I think there are just a couple others, SQL things. Always be willing to just do show create table, understand what your table's looking like, especially because sometimes what you're going to write in your create table statement or alter table statements might make it look different than what's in your own head. And this is my personal thing. I always go for writing SQL queries by hand instead of using the ORM's object relational maps, for different languages. It definitely can help you with development speed, but a lot of the times at hackathons, what you're doing isn't complex enough to end up going through the difficulty of learning an ORM, because sometimes they have such a huge package that you don't realize when you start with them, that you're like, you get halfway through the hackathon, you're like, I really wish I went with using pure SQL.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, those are some great tips. And what about you, Aman?
I think now that I've done a couple now, I think one of the big ones is understand what your core product is and what your core features are, and then cut it in half, because that's probably what you're going to build in your hackathon, just because the time constraint things coming up. And then I'd say save an equal bit of time for actually the demoing and the presentation. This is something that I did much better for my last hackathon, but for the previous two, even for Mentor.tech, funny enough, that video there's a reason there's a couple of jump cuts there, and that's because we were really pressed on time. Well, I think Alan unfortunately had his computer crash right while he was recording, and I, right out of nowhere, I'm just like, oh my God, I got to open up OBS and I got to start going with workflow. But those kind of things are very important for presenting your product. So I think having a general statement and then condensing it and having okay, well, if I can implement these features, what can I implement to still show that, hey, I've made something that's worthwhile using and there's a platform here. So that would be more for in terms of how do you want to approach the hackathon. I think from the idea of a learning perspective, I think make sure to ask a lot of questions. Don't be afraid. It's always someone's first time there. Everyone at hackathons are pretty nice people. They've been in your shoes before too, and they're more than happy to help. And it's totally okay to don't feel like you're bugging people. Make sure you can ask as many questions as you can, because ultimately the biggest thing you take away from these hackathons isn't the prizes. It's not even really the product, but it's just the learning experience and the idea that you can come back later and you have that you can use everything you know to build something much grander than you could beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
100%. And what about you, Harpreet?
Well, for me, the biggest thing about hackathons, I guess, like as Amin said, just kind of thinking about like having your idea and just kind of thinking about like what the main function is and kind of looking at like what things really are the foundation of your app and kind of working on those. And secondly, the one thing that I took away from when we were building Mentor.tech is that we focused more on functionality rather than beauty, because I'd rather have an app that actually functions properly and you can fix up the UI after, rather than having something that looks incredibly beautiful and doesn't work. And also, as Amin said, just kind of like being at a hackathon, like treat it as a learning experience. Don't really care about if you win or lose, because that's just a byproduct of the hackathon itself. Your best, like, it's all about learning, just kind of asking questions, just kind of making sure you understand what you're doing, rather than just kind of going on like Stack Overflow, copying, pasting, be like, okay, I fixed it, rather than understanding what actually went wrong.
Totally. Very cool. Okay, guys. Well, I think we're just about at time, so I think we're going to wrap it up right now. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me about hackathons and Cockroach and Mentor.tech. It was really a lot of fun. I hope you guys had some fun too. Yeah, so I think, I guess we'll just have to see you next time, okay? Alan, Aman, Harpreet, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you have gotten to witness the very first How I Built It. I'm really happy that you came and joined us. Please, if you liked this content, follow us on Twitch, follow us on YouTube, follow us on LinkedIn. I think we might have streamed this to LinkedIn as well. So hello, all those LinkedIn users out there. You should also join our community Slack. That's where we can talk to you about CockroachDB. You can ask your questions. You can meet your fellow CockroachDB users. So check that out. That's going to be in the description when we publish this video, but yeah, go to our website for the link to community Slack. And until then, you guys, I think we're going to try to do this on a regular basis, probably on Fridays in the morning, but stay tuned. You know, we're going to publish a schedule. You're going to find out more about these events. And by the way, if you, as a CockroachDB user, want to come on to this show, How I Built It, and be interviewed by me or one of my esteemed colleagues, you should please send us a line and we're going to get you onto the show. Anyway, so in about a couple of minutes, we actually have more content coming to you. It's really fun. We're going to be doing this game that we've been playing on the stream for the last couple of weeks called Grid Critters. It's about how to learn CSS, featuring some other folks. And so I think what I'm going to do is say goodbye and let them come on. And yeah, we'll see you guys soon. All right. Bye-bye.